All right, I think we probably have time here, so we can get started. Uh, Welcome to solving common pain points in your config manager environment. My name is Chris Muster. I'm the chief architect at Recast Software. I've been working on various Recast Software products since 2014 or so. And before that, I was a systems consultant helping IT admins implement config manager in their environments. Is this crowd, are you guys using config manager typically? Yeah, I would hope so with the title of the talk, but just wanted to check. High-level agenda. We're going to talk through a quick introduction of Recast Software, including a couple of highlighted products that we have in the suite, and then we're going to jump right into mostly demo stuff, right? So talk through some common pain points. I have some listed here, but we're going to probably drift around a little bit. Talk through various things, and if we have Q&A listed at the end, but if you have any questions, feel free to ask. I don't mind jumping into a topic if something comes up and you want to delve more into that. So real quick on Recast Software. So we've been a company for the last number of years focused on helping sysadmins manage devices in their environment. And so it all kind of started with the right-click tools. How many people are using right-click tools in their config man environments today? Perfect. Yeah, and if you're not using the right-click tools, I mean, we have a community version of the tools, free to use. Feel free to go to our website and check them out. And they're used by tens of thousands of users every day across the globe. So very popular tool set. With the enterprise right-click tools, kind of takes that and goes a little bit beyond that, right? So it adds the ability to run your right-click tools against workgroup devices, against non-domain joined devices or devices on untrusted domains. Gives you a level of permissions and auditing, and then a whole suite of extra features that we'll cover a little bit today. Last year we introduced Endpoint Insights. Endpoint Insights is our inventory and reporting platform, and it's really cool. It provides access to data that you can't get natively in Config Manager, and we'll talk a little bit about that today as well. Shift Left for ServiceNow was introduced maybe 2 years ago. That's our platform for ServiceNow. Basically, it's taking the right-click tools, putting them into your ServiceNow consoles to help your help desk or service desk users try to solve common problems, at the point of creating the ticket. And then just 2 weeks ago, we launched a new product called Privilege Manager. And Privilege Managers are our way to help you guys reduce the level of admin permissions in the environment while providing users access to use those admin permissions in the environment. We'll talk a bit about that today as well. So this slide is kind of the same concept, right? We're talking through all the different features. I'm going to skip over this and just jump right into demo if that's all right with everyone. Oh, and visit our booth. We have more. We have a $500 giveaway, so please go check that out. Sign up for it. We'll be launching into that a little bit after the event. Okay, so we had a number of folks using right-click tools in their environment. How many people here are responsible for packaging apps in their environment? There are quite a few. That's good. So one of the tools that I have personally started using when we're talking about application packaging in the context of testing is our Remote Software Center tool. And this tool is, this tool is super useful when testing remote apps. So my typical workflow is to deploy an application to a test collection, right? Deploy it as optional, and then go through and try to interact with the devices in that collection, and test to make sure that my silent install, my silent uninstall is working correctly. And so my typical workflow historically has been I'm going to go into the Software Center on those devices, right? And then remote in, go to Software Center, click install, do all those things, or use a required deployment where I'm not as sure about what state those devices are in. We've tried to solve this with the Remote Software Center by providing a user interface that looks familiar, right? But being able to interact with those devices at scale, right? So I'm interacting with the Software Center on multiple devices simultaneously. I'm listing all of the apps that are deployed in here. And if I choose to, I can come in to find Chrome, for example, and kick off the install right from this app, right? So I hit install here, And because we're using the same APIs that ConfigManager is using, if I come back in here and give it a second, we should see it start to kick off that installation. So there we go. It's starting using doing the silent install, and it's just using the native ConfigManager APIs to do that. So that's one thing I've been started to utilize more often, especially for myself when testing Recast Agent. I deploy it out, go through this process to start getting the installation going, getting the test going, and it's a quick way to go through and figure out which apps are working, which apps need some work. All right, does that seem like it'd be useful to folks? So other areas in here, we have our software updates node. One area that I've experienced as a consultant is a lot of clients don't want to use or don't want to do mandatory deployments for software updates to their servers, for example. They want their server admins to have more control, more granular control over when those devices get updates, right? And it's the same concept, right? So at one of my earlier orgs at the Department of Health, we would, our server admins would remote into these devices one at a time, hit the software updates tab in here and start kicking off the installation of those updates. Very manual and tedious process, especially if you have a bunch of servers in the environment. And so this would have been a lifesaver. Go in here, start the install of those updates, and do that remotely. Other things in Remote Software Center, you can kick off task sequences remotely. I don't really have any task sequences here, so I'm gonna, it's kind of boring. It's like the software updates. But you can also get a view of your configuration baselines that have been deployed, and kick off the reevaluation of those baselines if applicable for your environment. So that's Remote Software Center. How many folks in here have kind of an allowed software list in your organization you're forced to stick to? Was that common? What do I try to say? A list of approved software for your organization, right? That's usually pretty common. So one other tool I want to show off a little bit is our system information tool. And so this tool is a way for you to look at the applications that are in add remove programs on the remote devices in the environment. And it's very similar to that Remote Software Center tool, right? So you can see at a glance, holistically, well, more than just applications, but a bunch of information about the device. For example, in this environment, I can see, some operating system information, including, which domain devices are joined to, when things were installed, or when the OS was installed, and that kind of thing. Some hardware information about the device, but we can also get a view of all of the apps that are installed on the device, right? So the same set of things that you would see if you went into add remove programs on those devices, right? And so if I look for Chrome, for example, we just kicked off that Chrome install on this ConfigManager server. If Chrome, for example, wasn't in our approved software list, if we needed to empower our help desk to get rid of some of these things, this might be a useful tool for them to use. So, because they can just pop in here, check the box, and kick off the uninstall on that device, right? So we can see it, kicked off a new process on this. It's running silently in the background. We automatically make it run silently for any MSIs that we detect. And then if I hit refresh here, we'll see that Chrome no longer exists on that ConfigManager box, right? So it's relatively quick. Any questions about that so far? That's great. So when we're looking through some of these add remove programs, these applications, these are kind of more reactive, right? So we're reacting to a state. We're reacting to devices that have apps installed that aren't on our known good list, right? And it'd be nice if we had some tools in place to just avoid that altogether, right? So we want to have the ability to prevent users from installing those apps in the first place, right? And so that's where kind of local admin permissions and permissions management can come in, right? So in here we have this local group members option. This is a way for us to view the local group members on those remote devices, again, grouped by group name here. As I drill in, we'll see which members are available or are part of that local administrators group. And we can see, we have the local administrator account, domain admins for the devices that are domain joined, and then a couple of test accounts, or a test admin account, proxy service account, some of these. And if we want, we can empower our users to go ahead and remove those if we detect things that aren't, detect user accounts that shouldn't be part of the local admin group. This is great, but it's still perhaps a little bit reactive, right? So we're seeing a problem, we're solving it, but we're not doing a more policy-based approach to solving that. And that's where that new product we launched 2 days ago or 2 weeks ago comes in. It's called Privilege Manager. And so I'm going to jump over to one of our test boxes and just talk through a little bit more detail of what Privilege Manager is. So as mentioned, Privilege Manager is our privileged access management solution. It hooks into the Windows UAC credential providers. And so I'm going to show you the end user experience for Privilege Manager. So if I'm a regular user and I need to launch something as local administrator, I get the normal UAC prompt, and what I can do is come down under More Choices and then choose our Recast Privilege Manager option, right? And so this user that I'm logged into is not an admin on the box, right? They have 0 admin permissions on this box, so we've successfully taken away their rights, but we're still allowing them to elevate as needed, right? Like a just-in-time elevation to do the things that they need to do on that machine. Right, so here I have a couple of options. I have run with local account. That means I'm going to run this action, this opening the command prompt, as an account that we've pushed to the local administrators group on that device. I can run it with my domain account, right? So I'm going to run this process as the user, or activation code. So let's start with the run with local account. So I can choose which elevation account I want to use. Probably not useful for most environments, right? You're probably going to have one, right? So I'm going to choose the elevation account, and we require the user to give a reason, like why do you need this admin rights? And this is useful for auditing, these types of things in the future, right? So I'm going to say I need this, and hit yes. And what this is doing is it's communicating back to our Recast Agent Gateway component and saying, all right, this user is trying to elevate to this admin account on this box. Do they have permission to do this, right? And so we saw it pop up where our command prompt is now running as local administrator, and when I look, we're running as that elevation account that I chose during that UAC process. So, now I can do the things that I want to do. Normally, a user's probably not going to run a command prompt. They might use it to install an app that they really need before a presentation or a meeting or whatever it is, right? So that's the local version of that. Now, the local version is useful, but it doesn't always cover the things that we need to do, right, when we're running something as an admin, right? We might need to interact with a network share or something like that. For those scenarios, we have another option called Run with Domain Account, right? So same thing. We're going to come under More Options, choose Recast Privilege Manager, and we're going to run this with the domain account. And again, we have to give a reason. So it's always for those auditing purposes, right? You want to be able to track why people are running things in your organization. And this time we're prompting for the password of the user, right? We're requiring that the user prove they are who they say they are in this scenario. So if I type my password here, and this is to prevent scenarios where you just elevate as admin without. We don't want to elevate the user on the network without proving it, right? Because we're trying to avoid, we're trying to strike the balance between security and usability of the system, and this was a nice security boundary to have there. So again, when I hit OK, it validates that I have permission as the user to elevate in that fashion with that domain account. And this time, when I'm running this, I'm launched as an admin as my Chris M account. And these accounts will get added to the local administrators group, but because we have a policy-based admin control mechanism, we're going to remove those when we detect that this is no longer needed. And that is configurable on the server as well. So you can say, well, you get access to local admin for X number of minutes or an hour or whatever it is. And so we'll talk through the last option here because that'll cover that a little bit too. But the third scenario that we wanted to solve for, both of those two scenarios required internet access or network access to our Recast Agent Gateway component, right? Because it's evaluating that policy against that component. But there are scenarios where maybe your CEO is traveling and they need to install a printer or something like that, where they don't necessarily have that network access. Or maybe there's a scenario where you don't want users to be able to elevate themselves without talking to someone first, right? So we have this activation code option that lets you force the user to call in to talk to someone physical to say, hey, I need admin, can you help me out? And we'll talk through that real quick. So this use activation code option, you see we have only one text box here, and it's an activation code. And there's not much I can do as the user besides call my service desk. And so I'm going to jump over to our Recast Privilege Manager web server here. And I'm going to come under the Service Desk tab. And so this web UI is how we configure everything from deploying local users to the devices, deploying the local group memberships of those users. So we can say, well, I want to create a local admin account with a randomized password, store that password in the Privilege Manager database, and then set different policies for which accounts are local admin and which ones are not. But over here on the service desk, I have this option to create an activation code. And when I click into that, I get the option to search for the devices in my organization that I want to manage. And so I'm going to search for that Win10-3 device. And I'm going to find the accounts for that device. And we can see it knows about the two accounts that we were looking at earlier, that elevation account and that test admin account. And the service desk gets the option of how long they want this admin account or how long they want to allow the user to elevate as local admin. So we see we have 1 hour, 4 hours, 8 hours, 1 day. All of these options are configurable in the UI too. So if your policy is, well, we sure don't want someone to be an admin for a year, maybe you remove that option, right? 5 minutes, yeah. Or you can also do until the next gateway connection. The next time it comes into contact with our network, we're going to take away those admin rights again. So I'll leave the default here. And the help desk is forced to provide a reason for this admin elevation, right? So we provide 2 out of the box, but this list is customizable as well. So you can add more to it. You can remove these if they don't make sense for your organization. So I'll do printer installation and click Create Activation Code. And so it generates the activation code for me to read to the user. It provides a nice way to read it to the user if need be. For this example, I'm just going to copy it and run through it. But yeah, let's try that. Oh, I waited too long here. Let's get it set up again. So I'm going to use that activation code option. Then I'm going to type in my activation code, and then it pops up again. And it's using that elevation account the same way we had before. So yeah, this is Privilege Manager. We're super excited about it. If we come back to our Privilege Manager web UI, I mentioned that auditing piece is super important, and we can actually see when the user is elevating as admin. I only have a couple of systems in here, 2 that are work group based, and then 1 that's in my domain here. And you can see, I've been running this test a bit, but you can see the reasons. Yeah, you see all the reasons. You get the help desk provided ones, which are a bit more accurate here. And then the dates as well, and how long they're valid for. Does this seem like it'd be useful to folks? Yeah. All right, so breaking things. So we've gone through, Privilege Manager. How do we handle the local admin rights in our organization? That does a really good job of making sure devices stay compliant with our organization's policies, right? Nothing's worse than an end user kind of installing apps or configuring things that maybe they shouldn't be. Privilege Manager provides a path for you to remove those rights over time. However, even when you take away admin rights, you still run into scenarios where users can install apps. Have any of you have users that install user-based applications in your environments? Not worried about it? Is anybody worried about that, I guess, the first one? Okay. So what do I mean by user-based applications? Well, if I come back to my Windows 10 box here, you notice I have this app called Brave installed on this box. And if I look into the applications or admin programs for this, I can see it installed on this machine, right? Now, if I want to see, how bad of a problem is this in ConfigMgr? How many devices do we have in the environment that have this app installed? I might come into the monitoring node and come under one of these. Sorry, give me 1 second. Companies and products, software companies and products, and then list all the software in admin programs. Right, this is a native ConfigMgr report, and overall it works pretty well for finding all of the software that's installed within my organization. So I'm going to run it, and then I'm going to do a search for Brave in here to see where things are. And notice we don't have any results. Right, if I sort by name, come in here, I don't see the results in here. Right. And it's the same is actually true for the system information tool. Like we're using very similar methods to detect the list of applications in the environment. So if I search for Brave within this list, I don't see it here as well. Right? And so this problem is basically users installing apps to the user profile, and we don't have any visibility to those things, right, within the native ConfigMgr installation. And that's where another product we have called Endpoint Insights can come in. So if I, in the same reporting node, if I come over to software and then just look at our software dashboard within Endpoint Insights and use the same collection, Recast agent collection here, and run the report, looks a little bit different, right? But we can actually see this Brave Software Inc. Application here in the Brave browser, as well as which versions are installed and how many devices are installed in the environment. See, might be a little small. I forgot to install Zoom It, so let's do this, right? So now we gain access to actually see those things in the environment, and with Endpoint Insights, we're actually using a WMI provider to provide this information, right? So it all hooks natively into ConfigMgr. So you can write your own reports on this. You can write your own ConfigMgr queries or collections, make collections based on this. And just to show that, I'm going to come over to one of these devices and run Resource Explorer on it. Right, just a native ConfigMgr application, and we have all these EI underscore inventory classes. These are WMI classes that we provide, as part of it, and one of them is this EI underscore user program. So we can see, we have the Brave browser there as well. Give me 1 second. As well as some of the OneDrive things, but and it's not just user installed programs with Endpoint Insights, right? We have the ability to see which monitors are connected and at what resolution, we have a large customer that uses this at monitor replacement time to determine which cables they need to buy or which cables the technician needs to bring to the device in order to replace it, right? Monitor visibility is something that's been a pain point for for a number of our customers. So we try to provide that. We can see the map drives on the device. So if you're still using map drives, you can kind of see some of those things, as well as the local group memberships, right? So I can see the local administrators from Endpoint Insights. So I can validate that my privilege manager policies are actually doing what I thought they would do. So some of that is great. So we have visibility into the user installed applications. As I mentioned, we don't have a whole lot of visibility into it from the system information tool. So I don't have access to see some of the real-time information that I get with the right-click tools. The nice thing about Endpoint Insights and right-click tools for most of the actions is that it's a nice pairing between seeing things holistically at the organization level, because I'm inventorying the data, and then seeing things in real time. So we don't have an action available natively to do that, but we do have the ability to build our own action to help us see some of those things in a product called Right-Click Tools Builder. And Builder is kind of our platform, automation platform targeted at IT sysadmins. And with Builder, we expose access to all of the backing functionality inside of the right-click tools, inside of Endpoint Insights, Privilege Manager. All of our products will show up in this right pane here. And we have like 400 or so actions that are made available to folks over in this right pane. And you can add things to our Builder action just by dragging them in here. So let's say I wanted to run an application deployment eval cycle on this. I would just drag that action in, and then I would connect an arrow to it, right? And then as I connect that arrow to it, I have to provide a list of input parameters for that action. Right, so we have, here it's automatically detected that this action takes a computer name for an input parameter, and it's going to pull that computer name from the start node, the beginning of the recast action, or whatever I right-clicked on within the ConfigMan console. And it'll deploy or do that application deployment and eval cycle. Now, I've already created an action here called installed software, and what this installed software action does is it will list the software, the installed software on the device. This is actually the very action that backs that system information tool I was talking about, right? So this list of software is built by running this installed software action, right? And so you see we've mapped the computer name parameter in exactly the same way that we talked about. But for Endpoint Insights, we don't have an action yet to pull that information. But we do have a couple of helper plugins and actions inside of Builder that might help us along. So we have this WMI plugin and this list instances method. So this is listing all of the instances of a WMI class on the device. And so when I look at the mapped parameters for that action, this WMI list instances, I have the computer name parameter mapping, as you might expect. But I also have a namespace and a class name parameter. And so the namespace is actually using pop into magnifier. It's actually using that a namespace that we provide at Recast Software. So Recast Software, recast agent _ user, right? And then the other one, the class name, is using a class name within that namespace. And you can browse the classes and everything. If I scroll to the bottom here, we'll see the Endpoint Insights classes. So EI user provider, EI user drive, EI ODBC. Right, in here I've selected one called EI user ARP. Right, so all of these classes are available in in Endpoint Insights. And so I'm not going to save this, but if I run this action against that device, we can actually see what it looks like. So we build things in Builder, we run things in Runner. We're very good at naming things. We have our installed software action, And when I choose that action, I can either schedule it to run in the future, or I can run it right now. So I'm going to run it right now just so you can see what it looks like. And so here on this tab, we have the list of device installed software, the same list that we saw in that system information tool. And then the other tab is our user installed software. Right, so this way I can expose some of this functionality to my help desk, for example, if they need to find some of this information when before a call. Does that seem like it'd be helpful? All right. So this is all, I think it's really cool personally, but one of the challenges with this is it's not actionable in this scenario. So I can build out those builder actions and I can add, chain more and more actions afterward, but I can't interact with it in this UI, right? So if I wanted to, extend my automation further and maybe use some PowerShell to do that, we actually have an HTTP API that you can use that uses kind of the very same backing that that Builder has, right? So if we look at this API, we see a lot of the same stuff, right? We're setting up a set of input parameters. Here I've hard-coded the input parameters for the PowerShell script, but I can see 3 devices, W10, 1, 2, and 3. And they're all hitting that same namespace, right? The recast agent user with the EI user ARP action. Down here, I'm converting our input parameters to JSON so I can pass it in as the body of the request. And then I have I'm calling into our WMI list instances method, and that's actually the same, matches what you see in Builder, right? So you can kind of map what we're seeing there. And then I massage the results, right? So I get the results, I massage them into something that'll be visible later. And then I do the same thing as the Builder action. I grab the list of installed software using that same system information tool action, right? Again, massage the results so that it displays nice in my out grid view command. And so when I run that, we get the list of apps on multiple devices, right? So I can see, this Win10.1 box has Brave, sort of a display name. I can see all the devices that have that Brave browser, who it's installed as, the domain, and when it was installed. Any questions on that so far? Perfect. So I'm going to get into maybe a little bit more on some of the backend stuff. So I mentioned before that we're running these against workgroup devices, right? And so if you use the community right-click tools, you know that the actions always run as the user account that's running the ConfigMgr console. Right, so if you're running this on workgroup devices, obviously you're not going to have permission, right? Because you're signed into a device as as a domain user to launch that ConfigMgr console. And so we make this available by something called Recast Management Server. And Recast Management Server is our way of kind of customizing the execution of actions in your environment. It's our way of providing permissions to different actions in your environment, as well as our way of auditing what actions have occurred in the environment. Right. So we have a couple of ways we do this. So we have kind of 4 scenarios that we support today. We have our recast agent. That's our way of extending our right-click tools to workgroup joined devices. And it's actually how all of the actions have been running today throughout the demo. We have our recast proxy as well. So this is that service account route type. This is useful for extending your right-click tools to devices and untrusted domains, right? So if your company is purchasing a lot of companies and trying to consolidate the IT infrastructure, this can be a super quick way to spin up an agent that will interact with those untrusted domains or ConfigMgr sites, as well as the right-click tools route. And the right-click tools route is basically forces the action to behave the same way as it would if you were running the community version or enterprise standalone, right? So, I can demo this. If I move things around a bit, if I move Recast Agent to the bottom, for example, and I try to run that action again, we'll get some different results, right? We don't have the ability to get access to all of the results that we had on those other two devices. So, if I look at the audit log, we can actually see, what happened on those devices. So we can see that, W10.1 and W10.2, I got an access denied error message, right? Because I didn't have permission to do that. While the rest of these show all of the data that we've gotten from that action. And this is true for, any action that goes through the Recast Management Server. So as we've been going through this, we've been generating a ton of these actions that we can view results on, at any point to see, who's doing what within our organization. And then, beyond that, one of the other benefits of Recast Management Server is we can actually control who can do any of those actions inside of here, right? So if I come into our permissions tab, we can set up our own role-based access within Recast Management Server and control which actions they're allowed to run. And it's the same set of actions that we saw in Builder. It's the same set of actions that we saw in the API. And it's, super granular. So we mentioned that application deployment eval cycle, right? We can just check or uncheck that if we want. And, this will prevent our users from doing things that we don't want them to have access to. And when you're inside of the right-click tools and you have someone with limited permissions, what happens is that we determine which set of permissions are required, and then we'll gray out the actions that they're not allowed to run, right? So, they'll still see some of the stuff, but you'll only be restricted to the things that they can run. And you can get even more advanced with some of that too, because I was mentioning Builder earlier. With Builder, you have that huge list of actions, and what you can do is you can create your own custom actions that are specific to your organization and prevent users from running the backing actions, but you can still give them access to run the actions in the way that are allowed for your organization within Builder. And so what I mean by that, well, for example, if I gave someone permissions to run that installed software action, but not permissions to run the actual backing actions under here, installed software, list software, they would still be able to run that Builder action, right? And so you can kind of customize which things they're allowed to do and which things they're not allowed to do. Because they don't have this action, the Applications tab won't show up for them in the System Information tool, but they can still get access to it the other way if you want. And the last thing I'm going to talk through are recast scopes. So recast scopes are our way, so recast roles are our way to limit things based on what type of thing you're doing. Recast scopes are our way to limit them based on where you're doing them, right? So if I want users to have access to a certain OU or a certain device collection, that's where I can use recast scopes to say, well, you're allowed to run this set of actions on these devices and a different set of actions on these other devices, and so on and so forth. So if I come into my permissions tab here, or sorry, not there, on the user, I can choose the scopes that I want to assign to that user. I'm scoping the permissions for this administrator role. Right, so if I check this box and hit save, let's double check, and then I try to run this action again, I believe I'll get a different result yet again, because I don't actually have permissions to run anything on these devices, right? So if I come into the audit log and look at the results, I see insufficient recast permissions on this one, access denied on the other two. Actually, let me go back and fix my routing. Try it one more time. So I've limited myself on one or two of these devices, but not on the other. And so if I, again, come back into the audit log, look at that list, we can see all the stuff we would expect, and then insufficient recast permissions on W10-3 because I've prevented my account from accessing that. Does this seem like it'd be useful to folks? Is it? Okay. So I think that concludes most of the talk. So I'm going to open things up to Q&A. If people have any questions, feel free to ask away about anything we've seen. No questions? Okay. Is there anything about any of the products that anyone wants to see in more depth, or how they work in the background? Anything?
Yeah, sure. Day to day, I do a lot of application packaging and deployment. Why would I upgrade from the free tools to the paid tools? Is there anything I can get using those tools? The paid tools.
The paid tools?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so that remote software center feature is exclusive to the paid tools. The system information tool, when grouped in that way, is for the applications tab is also exclusive to the paid tools. So we'll show you this if you're running it on a single device in the community version, but in the enterprise version, we'll let you run it on multiple devices simultaneously. And then, yeah, and the question was about application packaging specifically?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so like those are the two, I would say the two areas. Like Remote Software Center for me is like the real app that I use when testing some of those things. And it's more testing, right? It's not like, how do I build the application? We have some stuff coming for, how do I help build the application? I mentioned, I think in the beginning, that Application Manager is coming soon. And actually, like, all the apps in here, I didn't create any of these. I created a couple, but most of them were pulled in via our, that product that's coming soon, right? So like the things that you're seeing in Remote Software Center, these are all, all the iconed apps essentially are the ones that I didn't do for the most part. So, we'll have more to talk about there for sure in the future. Yeah.
Do you force updates to client stations from this remote software center?
Like machine.
Like for example, the customer, the client, the customer doesn't want to update itself, so we can force it in their software center for them?
Yeah. So the software, it's not a great demo because I didn't actually prepare the updates, but.
You can say to the client, update in the software center now, because it goes all the time to laptop, or not reboot it or something, and then force it like that.
Yeah, exactly. So like in here, it would work the same way, where I select the updates themselves, and I would hit install, and it would kick off that same mechanism inside of the software center. Unfortunately, I've updated everything, so I can't show that. But and related to that, I mean, we can run all of the nested right-click actions from here. So if something isn't showing up, we can kick off that machine policy to try to force things along. If something is showing up as installed when we know it's not, we can do the app deployment eval cycle to kind of reevaluate some of those things. So all of that's available as well from the nested menus.
Just a pricing model.
Pricing model is based on device. Honestly, I don't know the exact details of it, but there's some folks at the booth that that know that for sure. So be worth talking to them. All right. Well, I think if there's no other questions, we can wrap it up. Well, thanks, everyone.